Welcome back. So now we know about the HTTP request that we want to send from Swagger. Let's figure out what's actually inside such a request and such a response. So let's start with the request right here and think of the request really as the envelope that we just talked about. It has all the information that we need in order to figure out who sent the request, what did they want us to do, where do we need to send the response, where should the request actually go, what type of request is it actually, and stuff like that. So it has all the information, this request, that we need in order to figure out how to use and get the right data from our request. And we'll dive into methods in a second. The response itself is, again, the guy who we kind of send back whenever we're done doing a request. And actually, if no response has been received after a while, it'll actually get a response that says timeout. So you'll get a response no matter what inside this setup right here. It might just time out if it takes too long. Now let's have a look at what we can send in a request. There's something called methods right here, and that's kind of a way for us to decide what type of request we're sending. Is it a request where we want to read some data? Then we would send a GET request. If it's a request we want to create some data, then we would send a POST request. If we want to update some data, we would send a PUT request, and if we want to delete some data, we would send a DELETE request. And if we go back to Swagger, you'll actually notice that right now in my application, I have two different ones right here. They have the same name, but the one is GET and the other is POST. These are actually the methods, meaning that if I call this one and execute it, I actually read some data back from the request. But if I call this one, and right now it doesn't work, but if I try this one, I would actually create a new video as my request. I know that because it's a GET request and a POST request, and I just know that with the protocol, these is the methods that should take care of getting data, reading it, or this should create the data in our setup right here. And the PUT should update it. So when we get a PUT request in here, I know that should just update the data. So that's what we use these methods for. We also have something in the responses that are worth talking about, and that's the codes. So when you actually have a response, in the end, it'll send back a code, a 3-digit code, which will be either an information, it will be a success, it will be something where you redirect to another page, an error from the client side, or an error from the server side. So this will give you information if things went as expected. You might get a success back saying everything went okay, you just created something, I accepted what you did, there was no content available. That's all success codes. You might get redirection codes saying that, well, I didn't find it, but I just sent you somewhere else. This has been removed, stuff like that. Or you might get the ones you might have already seen on the web, like it was a bad request, you're not authorized, you need to pay, it's forbidden, not found, and method not allowed, stuff like that. So you can get these request types as well, response types, sorry. And then the final one is internal server error, like if I made something wrong on the back end, I would send you one of these requests right here. Response codes right here. So that's what response codes are all about. And the final thing I want to talk about today, because we could keep going, is just headers. You have a lot of different headers you can pick from, and these headers give you information about specific things, like maybe you want to talk about authentication, maybe you want to talk about language choice, maybe you want to talk about how you can actually gzip your code, etc., etc. So here is actually how what code do I expect to get back, and what do I accept, to get back. Like I want to accept JSON, I want to accept text. There's a lot of headers we can actually choose. That's kind of the metadata of our setup right here, where we can ask for code, and all of this is pre-generated for you. You just have to pick the right one in your setup. And luckily, with the .NET Core framework, with the Web API, most of this is already set up for us, so we don't really have to do a lot of work ourselves. So that was a lot about HTTP and what it's all about. And if you're not satisfied yet, go and read the guide right here on Tutorials Point. There's a lot of more information, but we will start covering the basics inside our code and talk about how we use these different pieces of information right here. That's it for this lesson. See you next time. Bye.